Welcome to ILTV's Insider. I'm Aaron Porras, and today the new coalition is at another crossroads, and this time over the controversial family reunification bill, but more specifically on the section of the bill that prevents this law from extending to Palestinians who marry Israelis. The bill is intended to allow non-Jewish Israeli citizens to extend citizenship to their spouses. But in 2003, an amendment to the bill was passed preventing Arab Israelis from extending citizenship to their Palestinian spouses in the West Bank and Gaza. The argument being that individuals were abusing the law to import terrorist operatives. And every year since, the law has been renewed, that is, until now. Supporters of the bill are now split between the coalition and the opposition. And while pressuring the opposition to put national security first and vote in favor of the renewal, the opposition is vowing to vote against it in hopes of embarrassing the new unity government. Meanwhile, critics of the bill say that it's racist to begin with and prevents Palestinians from legitimately unifying their families. And many of these critics are now partners in the new Bennett-Lapid coalition. So in efforts to come up with a compromise before the deadline to renew, the coalition is deciding for now to simply delay the vote. The question is what will happen when the day finally comes. Joining us to discuss is attorney for the International Legal Forum, Russell Shalev, and Jessica Montel, Executive Director for Hamoked, the Center for Defense of the Individual. Thank you both so much for being with us. Now, Russell, I'm actually going to start with you. Tell me a little bit about this law and its history, please.
So this law is an amendment to the Israeli citizenship bill that prevents residents from enemy countries, so Palestinians from Judea, Samaria, Gaza, Iranians, Lebanese, Syrians, and Iraqis, from gaining Israeli citizenship through marriage to Israeli citizens. During the Second Intifada, there were widespread attempts by terrorist organizations to recruit Palestinian spouses of Israeli Arab citizens to carry out terrorist attacks. Hundreds of Palestinians have received Israeli citizenship through marriage with Israeli citizens, and there's no parallel case worldwide of allowing mass immigration of enemy citizens during wartime. So I just wanted to say the bill came directly after a terrorist attack in Haifa in March 2002, which killed 15 people, carried out by a suicide bomber who received Israeli ID through family reunification. And according to the Israeli Justice Ministry, the law is the direct result of 23 murderous terrorist attacks carried out by Palestinians, by Palestinian residents who received Israeli citizenship through marriage to Israeli citizens. So
Jessica, when you hear some of these facts and the groundwork that went into this bill, how do you respond, especially looking back now from today?
Well, I think from the beginning, what you heard were two different contradictory justifications for the law. It's very easy to justify all sorts of things as necessary for security, and then who's going to say you can't do all sorts of things to keep us citizens safe? But right from the beginning, you also heard the demographic justifications for the law. And now in these past few days of negotiations about passing the renewal, you also hear both sorts of justifications. So right away, I think we need to be suspicious of these very dire warnings about the security dangers of this law, when we know that half the time what they're talking about are demographic considerations. They don't want more Arabs having any legal status in the country. And I hope we can all agree that that is a completely prohibited reason to be passing laws determining who citizens of the country can live with and submit applications for family unification with. I mean, the idea that a democracy is making calculations about the rights of citizens based on demographic considerations is blatantly racist and should not at all be allowed. I would also say, again, everyone knows that this law is super problematic. It's not a law, it's a temporary order that is passed for 1 year. And on that basis, it was approved by Israel's High Court of Justice by a tiny margin. It was approved for 1 year because they knew it was super problematic for a democracy to be passing this kind of law. So every year they're extending it for 1 year and then another year. And we've been in this situation for 17 years. So I think it's long past the time just not to extend it again.
Russell?
So first, I want to be clear. Every country has the right to determine its immigration policy. Most countries don't grant automatic right or even residency to non-nationals because of marriage to citizens. So there's no principle in international law that Israel must grant citizenship rights first of all to anybody by marriage, but specifically, right? I'm sure that Jessica, right, is aware that Israel has a long-standing armed conflict with Palestinian residents of Judea, Samaria, and Gaza, among also Iraq, Syria, and Iran. Right. So certainly Israel has every right to determine its immigration policy vis-a-vis these people. But let's be clear, right? Jessica was very quick to dismiss the security concerns behind the law. But right, in May 2017, at a Knesset Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee hearing, right, Israeli officials revealed that from 2001 to 2017, 49 Palestinians used their legal status in Israel to carry out terrorist attacks. And it doesn't just go to the first generation of Palestinians who received citizenship. Right, in November 2017. Sergeant Ron Kukia was stabbed waiting for the bus in Arad. Investigations revealed that the two terrorists who murdered him were second generation to Palestinian parents who received citizenship through marriage. Similarly, in February 2018, Itamar Ben Gal was murdered in Ariel by terrorist Urjit from Yafo, similarly second generation. So, I mean, it just seems natural that the state of Israel has every right to regulate who is coming in, especially when they're coming in from a hostile population.
Okay, so let me tell you the secret about this law. It doesn't prevent them from coming in. In fact, they are here. What the law, again, because it was so problematic when it was passed in the beginning, it has been, let's say, watered down over the years. The current situation is these people, spouses of citizens or residents of Israel, receive stay permits from the military. Instead of any kind of legal status, they have a stay permit that has to be renewed every year or two. So they're physically present inside Israel or East Jerusalem. And again, the overwhelming majority of the victims of this policy. I am a legal aid office. I run a legal aid office in East Jerusalem. We are helping hundreds of families every year who are the victims of this policy. East Jerusalem families who just married a man or woman, who married somebody who lives just down the road. But the way that the municipal boundary has been drawn in Jerusalem means that one of them is a Jerusalemite and the other of them is a West Banker. You have 9,000 families like that in Jerusalem. It's not that they're prohibited from being here. They're here. They're just denied social residency rights. They're just living in a constant state of limbo that they have to renew these stay permits every year. So again, the security justification is false. Also with any sort of family unification process, a citizen of Israel who marries somebody from Europe or the United States, they're also going through a very rigorous security check, and people are denied upgrades of family unification, Europeans and Americans, because of those security checks. So the same thing is being done with Palestinians. Again, now under this current law, it's just a much more, let's say, humiliating and tenuous status. It is not keeping people out of Israel.
Okay, right. So Jessica, right, has said that the law doesn't serve a security purpose, but the fact is that Israeli security officials have long supported this law. Before this law was passed, right, terrorists who abused this law abused their Israeli identification papers to bring Palestinians from Judea and Samaria, wave them through checkpoints to bring them into Israel to carry out terrorist attacks. So the fact that those people may be able to physically live in Israel is irrelevant, right? They don't have the Israeli ID to go quickly through checkpoints and security checks. The security officials, right, oppose individualized checks for Palestinian spouses. They believe that it's ineffective, it's too cost prohibitive, and also the recruitment attempts from Palestinian terrorist organizations only happen after spouses receive Israeli citizenship. So
again, I think we need to make a distinction between two different things. You have, of course, Israel has security concerns. Of course, Israel has to take measures to protect its population. Even that is not a blank check. Of course, we would agree that there are limits on what you can do, even to be advancing security objectives, collective punishment of an entire population, racial profiling of an entire population as dangerous, 2.5 million people under Israeli control, to define that as an enemy that we are waging a war with. Again, civilians living under the rule of the Israeli military is not an accurate description of events. So even when it comes to security measures, there are limits in what can be done to be advancing clear, legitimate security needs of keeping us safe. But the fact that every justification for this law is mixing security with demographic concerns should be a red flag to anyone who uncritically accepts this as a security policy. Time and again, even our defense minister just said this law is crucial for security and to safeguard Israel's as a, the Jewish democratic state. Again, mixing security and demographic concerns in a way that right away should flag that something is wrong with these justifications.
Russell, what do you say actually to the argument? I'm sorry, I just wanted to piggyback on what Jessica was saying. What do you say, Russell, to the arguments that a big portion of this law is simply to maintain Israel's Jewish majority?
Well, first of all, Israel, like any country, right, has the right to determine who enters its borders, who becomes a citizen. And since Israel's very foundation, right, the maintenance of a Jewish majority has been Israel's raison d'etre, right? Since the Oslo Accords, there was a intentional policy of Palestinians to promote a backdoor right of return for Palestinians without this being part of political negotiations, just a blanket entry of hundreds of thousands of Palestinian residents of Judea and Samaria.
Hundreds of thousands? A blanket entry of hundreds of thousands that are trying to get citizenship?
Yes. Right. According to Israeli statistics, at least 150,000 Palestinians in the past decades have received citizenship through marrying Israeli spouses. And yes, Israel, like any country, has the right to determine its immigration policy.
I have to stop you again. I have to stop you. We're not talking about immigration policy. You keep saying it's immigration policy. We're talking about the rights of citizens. Do citizens of Israel, Jews and Arabs, have equal rights, or do they not have equal rights? That's the question. One second. It's not about the rights.
No blanket policy that says that there's no blanket policy anywhere that says that spouses of citizens are able to gain citizenship. Try it in the United States. You will not get citizenship because of immigration concerns that every country has the right to determine.
Just to follow, what citizen of the United States would be denied the right to live with their spouse in the United States? I'm not familiar with any restriction like that.
There is an immigration process, of course, and potential spouses could absolutely be denied citizenship. And prospective spouses who are applying for citizenship can and absolutely are denied by United States immigration services.
Of course. Of course, we're not talking about automatic citizenship. In Israel, the process is not even citizenship. There are many hurdles that you go through. If I, a citizen of Israel, marry somebody from the United States and ask for status for them here, of course, there is a graduated process of several years of interviews and security checks and other checks before that individual is given status. That is completely different than setting a blanket prohibition to say this group of citizens, without looking into the individual specifics of each case, this group of citizens is a priori denied the right to ask for any status for their spouse. I do not know of any democracy that has that sort of prohibition.
The law is ethnically neutral, right? It applies equally.
Yes. If you wanted to marry a Palestinian from Ramallah, you would also have problems. But we know that that's not the case.
Neither does it apply. Neither does it apply necessarily to Palestinians or to Arabs. It applies to Palestinian residents of Judea, Samaria, and Gaza. A group that, yes, Israel, that has been waging a violent war against Israel for decades. I don't know of any parallel of any country that would be allowing mass migration of hostile residents of an enemy entity.
You are talking as if we're talking about a foreign country 1,000 miles away. As you know very well, we can walk to occupied territory. You have Israeli citizens living in occupied territory.
Jews cannot walk to Palestinian areas. Those who do though are met with violence, are met with lynches. So no, Jews cannot walk to Ramallah, to Jericho.
My experience is very different. My experience is very different. But the point being, we are talking about the rights of citizens of the country and residents of the country, because again, and there is a lot of fear mongering about this population that we're talking about. Just to give you some numbers, we're talking about 10,000 people. It's 9,300 that are living with these stay permits, another 3,500 that have the A5 visas where they've frozen any upgrade of them. So about a little over 10,000 people. It's not, a huge population. It's a population that every year is being subjected to this very thorough security checks. Any sort of upgrade of their status would be contingent on these security checks. So I think, again, to be phrasing this whole problem in this panic-like situation. Of course, the Israeli military is in control of this entire territory, the West Bank, all of the areas, and has a very close cooperation with the Palestinian Authority. The Israeli military will tell you that their best partner in fighting terrorism is the Palestinian Authority. To be phrasing it as if we are at war with a hostile enemy country, we are ruling over a civilian population. And again, the largest group of victims of this policy are Jerusalem Palestinians who have married somebody just down the road, because we have put up all of these distinctions between Palestinians with this color ID card and Palestinians with that color ID card to be determining who is allowed to fall in love and get married and live safely in their home. I also want to flag that you have children with no legal status, because the law also applies. Children from the age of 14 are also banned from obtaining any status because of this law.
I want to see if there's maybe, I'm sorry to cut you off, but I want to see if there's maybe some sort of compromise that we could agree upon. Is there, say, Russell, for example, in similar to the United States, since you brought that example earlier, a immigration quota, you could say, that, as Jessica suggested, would be based very heavily on contingent on security checks and regular checkups and intelligence to determine the applicant's connections to any sort of terrorist entity. Is that out of the realm of possibility?
So, right, I'm not a Knesset member, neither am I a member of government, right?
Speculatively.
No, but the point here is that, right, all of us come up with certain potential solutions, right? This is the solution that the government has come up with. This solution that security officials support, based on their professional judgment. So I mean, neither is my point to necessarily say that the law is good or that it's bad. But this is just a regular piece of immigration policy that, like any government, right, Israel has the right to pass, and there's nothing discriminatory, there's nothing malicious about this law.
Again, just to reiterate, if that were the case, it would be passed as law. It's not law. It's a temporary order valid for 1 year, because they know that it would be completely illegitimate to be passing such a law that discriminates against certain Israeli citizens. If it were a completely legitimate immigration policy, the Israeli High Court of Justice, in an extended panel, would not have approved it with the tiniest majority solely for 1 year. Everybody knows it's super problematic. There's no reason to feign innocence that this is not a blatantly discriminatory policy. Yes, it prevents anyone from marrying a Palestinian from Jenin and getting status with them. But we know who actually marries a Palestinian from Jenin, and it is Arab citizens of Israel and residents of East Jerusalem that where these marriages are common, where they have social and familial connections with these people, fall in love, and want to get married.
All right. With that, unfortunately, I do have to end it. Thank you so much, Jessica Montel and Russell Shalev, for joining us. It was a pleasure to have you both. I'm Aaron Porras, and please, everybody watching, tune in next time on Insider for more on everything Israel. If there's a topic that you'd like us to cover next, let us know about it in the comment sections online. And finally, for more news from Israel, follow ILTV on Facebook and Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube and our ILTV.tv channels. Thank you again. Be well. We'll see you soon.